You were never supposed to hear this. Not from me. Not from anyone. Because if you truly knew how deep the rot went, you'd never sleep soundly in your house again. This isn't just another tale of suburban warfare or a petty HOA dispute. What happened on that quiet, tree-lined street was just the mask. The real story hides behind it, a system designed to enslave minds, control territory, and manipulate the very identity of who gets to belong. Let me pull you deeper. He thought he was simply moving into a home, a gift from bloodline, from grief, from family. But that inheritance wasn't just a house. It was a gateway into a web of invisible governance that most Americans don't even realize rules their lives. He walked into Oakage Estates thinking he'd found peace. He walked into a neighborhood designed not for community, but for compliance. And the moment that truck backed into his driveway, they activated. Flashing red and blue lights. A 911 call. The accusation, squatter. But here's what they don't tell you. HOAs aren't just about grass height and mailbox color. They are legal fiefdoms, private governments embedded in public society. And the woman who made that call wasn't just an entitled Karen with a clipboard. She was a node in a psychological control grid, the type used to enforce uniformity, silence dissent, and erase individual sovereignty under the guise of community standards. She watched him from across the cul-de-sac, not as a neighbor, but as a sentry, a gatekeeper, a programmed agent of control. And she didn't need a badge or a uniform, because in this twisted system, she was the law. You think freedom is protected by your name on a deed? You think blood ties and a will matter when you're up against the shadow architecture of the modern suburban empire? This is not about legality. This is about dominance. And what happens next is what happens to any man who dares to claim something that wasn't pre-approved by the invisible elite. So stay with me. Because what you're about to discover isn't just a story. It's a warning, a mirror. And once you look into it, you'll never be the same again. Next, Section 2, the control mechanisms behind HOAs and how they mimic ancient psychological dominion systems. Now the descent begins. Harmless words, harmless initials. That's what they want you to believe. But homeowners associations aren't just about neighborhood beautification. They are proto-governments, miniature monarchies built on Byzantine rules, weaponized paperwork, and a social caste system hidden beneath manicured lawns. Let me break it down. You see, these institutions were designed to replace the village elder with the bureaucrat, the tribal council with the board meeting. But make no mistake, the soul of this machine is ancient, older than HOA charters, older than suburbia. It is the spirit of selective inclusion, masked as civility. In ancient Rome, there was a class called the decurions, local officials who maintained order through surveillance, property control, and public shaming. Sound familiar? Fast forward 2,000 years, and now your neighborhood has Patricia Thornton, the HOA president, a woman in a blazer instead of a toga, a sword of bylaws instead of iron, and she rules not with consent, but with conditioning. A's install themselves into your psychology. They sell you the dream, safety, serenity, rising property values. But the cost is obedience. Uniform fences, approved paint colors, sanitized identities. Once you're inside, they monitor how long your grass grows, what curtains you hang, who parks in your driveway. Because control isn't about necessity, it's about ritual. A daily submission to something higher, something watching. So when this man inherited his uncle's house, he wasn't just receiving property. He was trespassing into a domain that demands fealty. No vetting, no paperwork, no interview. That's not a bureaucratic issue, it's a spiritual heresy. And like the inquisitors of old, Patricia saw him as a contaminant, an outsider who bypassed the sacred rites. So she did what all gatekeepers of control do. She summoned force. A false 911 call, an accusation, a public interrogation in his own driveway. Because in systems like this, facts don't matter. Appearances do. She didn't need to prove he was a criminal. She only needed to make him look like one. Control systems operate best when wrapped in illusion. They don't need chains when they have paperwork. They don't need walls when they have neighbors watching through the blinds. And they don't need to kick you out if they can make you feel like you never belonged. So now let me ask you, how many parts of your life are ruled the same way? How much of your freedom is just managed compliance? The descent continues. But first, if you feel the shift, if your mind is waking up, comment this below twice to lock in your transformation. I will no longer bow to false kings. Say it twice in public. Let the algorithm and the architects see you. Now, let me show you what happens when the controlled begin to fight back. This is where the mask begins to slip, and you realize you weren't living in a neighborhood. You were living in a simulation. The man tried to play by the rules. He showed documents. He brought evidence. The will, the death certificate, the title deed, freshly notarized. He believed that truth would protect him. But in control systems built on illusion, truth is not a shield. It's a threat. Patricia didn't even read the documents. She slid them back across the table like contaminated evidence. These can be forged. Forged. Do you hear it? That subtle spell. Doubt. Not proof. Not judgment. Just suggestion. In the architecture of power, all it takes is one whispered seed, and the mob begins to turn. She didn't need evidence to destroy his reputation. She had proximity to power, and that was enough. And so it began. False rumors. Anonymous complaints. Background check demands from people who didn't even know his name. Photos of him visiting his own home, labeled trespassing. A petition to evict him from a house he legally owned. Because in this system, ownership is an illusion. You can have the paperwork. You can have the law. But if you don't have the favor of the keepers, they will erase your presence like a typo in a forgotten draft. This isn't about property. This is about psychological warfare. You are being tested. How far can they push before you break? How many layers of stress can they add before you comply? HOA loyalists, retired enforcers with too much time and too little soul. One of them stood at the edge of his driveway, clipboard in hand, not guarding the neighborhood, guarding the narrative. This is not new. Throughout history, when regimes rise, they weaponize the average person. They convince the passive to become protectors of the lie. And those who dare to stand alone? They are branded, discredited, isolated. But this man didn't fold. He didn't rise from it, and he studied the terrain. He turned his silence into strategy. Because once you realize you're inside a rigged game, you stop playing by the rules. The descent is no longer a fall. It becomes a march. And in the next phase, he will start to dismantle the system, not with rage, but with the very tools they used to trap him. Keep watching. This is the part they never expect. When the victim becomes the architect of collapse, this is where the hunter becomes the shadow, and the shadow becomes the storm. Most people would have packed up. Most people would have said, it's not worth the fight. And that's exactly what the system counts on. But this man, he didn't retreat. He documented. He studied. He waited. Because when you stare long enough into the machinery of manipulation, you begin to see the gears behind the curtain. And once you see them, you learn how to break them. The next time they tried to frame him, the camera was already rolling. And when Patricia made her move, 911 call, false report, fake panic, she didn't know her performance had an audience. Angela, the quiet neighbor. Watching. Filming. A civilian, yes, but more than that, a witness. A node of truth in a web of lies. And when the police arrived, when they demanded proof, he didn't shout. He didn't beg. He calmly handed over the blade, documentation, evidence, identity. The system blinked. It had expected fear. It met fortified certainty. And that's when the first fracture appeared. The officers saw it. Angela saw it. Patricia felt it. The spell of control depends on one thing: belief. When that belief cracks, even for a moment, the whole house trembles. And what followed was uncontrollable. Angela's video hit the internet like a virus injected into the bloodstream of the hive. Within hours, the story wasn't just local, it was national. HOA. Karen tries to evict a homeowner from his own inherited house. People didn't just watch, they recognized the pattern. The abuse, the control, the manufactured gatekeeping. Comment sections exploded. HOA survivors from across the country surfaced like ghosts from under floorboards. They had stories, too. Stories the system had buried. Stories of selective enforcement, racial bias, economic bullying, and the quiet rage of thousands who had once thought they were alone. But now, they were watching. And when the machine realizes it's being watched, it does one of two things. It silences, or it shatters. Patricia tried the first. But the backlash was too loud, too visible, too viral. Her tactics weren't just oppressive now, they were liabilities. Her board panicked. Her employer scrambling. Her power evaporating. Because truth doesn't need permission. It just needs amplification. You want to dismantle the system? You don't fight it head on, you expose it. You make its ugliness undeniable. You flood its fortress with the one thing it can't digest, light. And as that light spreads, the old powers begin to fall. Now the beast bleeds. And when power bleeds, it shows you what it really is. Patricia wasn't just dethroned. She was unveiled, stripped of her borrowed authority, revealed not as a protector, but a parasite. The HOA scrambled. The property management company, once silent, suddenly issued a public statement. We do not condone the actions of our former HOA president. Damage control, desperation. But it was too late. The dam had cracked. More neighbors spoke out. Quiet residents who had once nodded in fear now stepped forward with stories. Years of intimidation, selective punishment, gatekeeping masked as policy. It was never about safety. It was always about control. You see, these systems don't just fail when exposed. They implode because they were never built on strength. They were built on secrecy. Power, in its most fragile form, always hides behind the illusion of order. And when that illusion is burned down, only the architecture of oppression remains. Let me say this clearly. What happened to Patricia wasn't personal. It was inevitable. Because power that cannot evolve must be consumed. A restraining order, a $5,000 fine, lawsuits pending. Her name dragged through every digital alleyway. But those are just symptoms. The real collapse? The moment the people stopped fearing her. You want to know the most dangerous thing in a controlled system? A man who knows he's free, because he becomes the signal. He becomes the breach. And every man watching, every one of you, starts to ask, what if I stopped bowing too? That's the virus they can't contain. That's why they panic at exposure. Because one awakened man awakens 1,000 more. And here's the truth. They'll never tell you. HOAs are just the surface layer. Beneath them lie deeper forces. Insurance companies, zoning boards, covenants written decades ago by men you'll never meet, but who still control your land, your wealth, your choices. It's all connected. You think you own your home? Try skipping an HOA fee. Try painting your door red without permission. Try planting a flag they don't approve of. And watch what happens. The system will come not with tanks, but with letters. Not with soldiers, but with code enforcement. Because modern tyranny doesn't wear a crown. It wears a logo. And it doesn't break down your door. It makes you sign it away. But now, you know. And once you know, you can never unknow. You've seen behind the curtain now. You've heard the tone of control, not shouted, but whispered, not declared, but implied. And that's how it always works. They don't chain you. They make you chain yourself. They offer comfort, predictability, lawn maintenance, and gated serenity in exchange for obedience, silence, and slow psychological decay. But here's the secret they don't teach in schools, in churches, or in contracts. Every system of control depends on one thing: your agreement. And the moment you withdraw that agreement, you become dangerous. That man who stood in his driveway facing 2 cops and an empire of silent neighbors, he didn't just reclaim a house, he reclaimed his identity. And now, it's your turn. Because the truth is, you've already felt it. That tension in your chest when you walk into your own home and wonder who really owns your space. That buried rage when a stranger tells you what kind of fence you're allowed to build. That tightening in your gut when you're told what car you can park, what words you can say, what truth you're allowed to speak. This isn't just about HOAs. This is about your life, your mind, your ability to stand tall in a world that's been trained to kneel. You were raised inside a system that taught you to fear power instead of become it. But not anymore. If you've made it this far, you are not asleep. You are not compliant. You are not blind. You are one of us. And I want you to do something again. Something that seals this moment. Go to the comments. Type it twice, like an oath. I will no longer bow to false kings. Once for them, once for you, because the story doesn't end here. The world is full of Patricias, full of hidden contracts, full of psychological fences you didn't even know you were living behind. And your job now is to burn them down, not with violence, not with chaos, but with clarity, sovereignty, and unapologetic awareness. This is your land. This is your body. This is your mind. No HOA, no bureaucrat, no institution forged in fear has the right to govern your existence. You are not a tenant in your own life. You are the builder, the breaker, the storm. And they will fear the moment you realize it, because you just did. Welcome to the rebellion. We've been waiting for you.